There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, when something small stirs within. Maybe it's a flash of irritation towards someone too loud. A subtle jealousy when a friend shares their success. Or a judgment that slips out before you can catch it. To the outside world, it's nothing. Just a passing reaction. But deep down, something ancient and hidden has been touched. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the part of ourselves we exile to survive, the fears, desires, and truths we've learned to bury because someone once told us they were too much. And yet, the shadow never leaves. It lingers in our relationships, our triggers, our silence. It whispers, not to hurt, but to be heard. You may think you've moved on, that you're healed, strong, in control. But then one day, someone looks at you the wrong way, and suddenly you're not reacting to them. You're reacting to something inside you that never got to speak. Healing doesn't begin with light. It begins with the courage to face the dark. And if you're listening to this, maybe that moment has already arrived for you. So the question is not, do I have a shadow? The question is, am I willing to meet it? In this journey inward, there are no shortcuts, but there are simple steps. And that's what we'll uncover. 3 powerful but gentle practices to begin shadow work. No shame, no judgment, just an invitation to come home to yourself. No one is born with a shadow. It is not part of your nature. It is the result of a lifetime of choices, silences, and wounds. In the beginning, we are whole. Children don't separate themselves into acceptable and unacceptable. They just are loud, sensitive, curious, honest, vulnerable. But then, correction begins. Don't cry. Be strong. That's not ladylike. You're too much. And little by little, we learn what parts of ourselves are welcome and what parts aren't. So we adapt, we become who they need us to be, and everything else we hide. Not because we're dishonest, but because we want to be loved. Carl Jung called this hidden side the shadow, a collection of disowned traits, banished emotions, forgotten dreams. It holds the things we were told not to feel. The anger we weren't allowed to express. The fears we had to swallow. The pride we buried to stay small. Even joy, if someone made us feel guilty for it. The shadow is not evil. It is simply unseen. But what remains unseen begins to control us from the dark. That's why a simple comment can ruin your day. Why you lash out when you don't want to. Why you attract the same painful relationships. The shadow doesn't disappear, it waits. And the more you reject it, the louder it becomes. But here's the truth, you're not wrong for having these parts. You're not broken, you're human. You were shaped to survive. And now you're awakening. Because once you begin to notice your shadow, you begin to reclaim your wholeness. And the pieces that once made you feel ashamed may be the ones holding your power. So instead of asking, what's wrong with me? Try asking, what part of me is still waiting to be accepted? Because the shadow is not here to punish you. It's here to be brought home. It doesn't take much, a glance, a tone, a comment that lingers too long. And suddenly something inside flares up. You feel it before you can name it. Tightness in the chest, heat behind the eyes, a sharp impulse to defend or retreat. Most people brush it off. I'm just tired. They were being rude. I'm fine. But the ones who begin to heal, they pause, they look closer. Carl Jung once said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. So when a trigger arises, it isn't a flaw, it's a signal, a doorway. What is it that hurts so deeply? Why did that moment hit a nerve? Maybe you felt dismissed because a younger version of you once begged to be heard. Maybe you envied someone's confidence because your own was once shamed. Maybe you judged someone's freedom because you were taught to hide your own. The shadow lives inside these moments. It doesn't show up as darkness, it shows up as discomfort. And the first step toward healing is learning to notice it without running away. So the next time it happens, pause, not to fix it, not to suppress it, but to witness it. Ask gently, what is this emotion trying to protect? What part of me is speaking right now? You don't need to have the answers, you just need to start asking the right questions. Because once you become curious instead of reactive, something shifts. The trigger loses its grip. The emotion becomes a messenger, not a master. And in that pause, however brief, you reclaim a piece of yourself. This is not about blaming yourself. It's about meeting yourself with honesty, with compassion, with eyes wide open. Because the shadow is never louder than in the moments you try to silence it. But when you listen, truly listen, you begin to turn toward the very part of you that's been waiting, not to be judged, but to be held. There's something sacred about writing. It slows the noise, it gives form to the formless, it allows you to speak without interruption, to say what you've never had permission to say out loud. For many who begin shadow work, writing becomes the bridge between the unconscious and the conscious, between the person they've shown the world and the parts they've kept hidden for years. It doesn't have to be poetic, it doesn't have to make sense, it only has to be true. You might begin with a prompt like, what do I judge most in others? What emotion do I fear being seen in me? When did I first learn it wasn't safe to be myself? At first, the answers might come slowly, fragmented, uncertain. But with each word, the silence inside begins to soften. Because the act of writing is more than reflection. It's an invitation to honesty. And for some, it's the first time they've ever truly listened to themselves. When you write without filter, you might discover things that surprise you. You may find you're still carrying a memory you thought you had forgotten. You may realize your anger is masking grief. That your jealousy is really a hunger to be seen. That your pride is guarding a wound that never healed. And in those moments, something profound happens. You stop being afraid of your shadow. You begin to understand it. So if you're ready to try, don't wait for the perfect journal. Grab a napkin, open a note on your phone, or whisper into a voice memo. Ask yourself what you've never been allowed to say. Then write it, say it, name it. Because what you name, you reclaim. And what you reclaim loses the power to control you in secret. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about meeting yourself with clarity and compassion. The truth is, you've always been speaking. You've just never had the chance to write it all down until now. Once the words are on the page, raw, imperfect, unfiltered, something begins to shift. Because when truth is spoken, even in silence, the shadow finally feels seen. And now comes the most tender part of the work. Not resisting the shadow. Not trying to fix it. But sitting beside it, like an old friend. For some, it helps to imagine the shadow as a younger version of themselves, hurt, confused, trying their best to survive. For others, it appears as a voice they've silenced for too long. However it comes to you, let it speak. Ask it gently. What do you need from me? What are you trying to protect? What pain have I ignored for too long? This step is not about analysis. It's about presence, about learning to hold space for the uncomfortable without abandoning yourself. And maybe for the first time you begin to realize you're not broken, you're not too much, you're not a mistake. You were shaped by expectations, by wounds, by the stories you were told, but none of that defines you. In meeting your shadow with compassion, you begin to rewrite the script, you begin to set boundaries without guilt, to speak without shrinking, to feel without apologizing. Because true healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you to hide. There will still be days when the shadow shows up. You will still react. You will still feel the pull of old patterns. But now, you are aware. And awareness is the beginning of freedom. As Jung once said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. So let this be your reminder. The parts of you that you've hidden the longest may hold the gifts you need most. If this message touched something inside you, pause, reflect, and share it with someone who might be walking this path too. What part of your shadow is asking to be seen today? Comment below. And if you're ready to meet yourself fully, light, dark, and everything in between, subscribe and walk with us on this journey inward.